They threw me out the moment they found out I was pregnant, like I was something shameful. I raised my son alone, with nothing but fear and determination. 20 years later, the same people who abandoned me stood in front of him, and what they saw left them speechless. Before I begin, if you've ever lived through betrayal like this, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to Storyflow Diaries. I still remember the exact sound of the front door slamming behind me that night. It echoed louder than anything I had ever heard, like it was sealing my fate. I stood there on the porch, my hands trembling, one resting protectively over my stomach, even though there was barely anything to feel yet. Just a secret, just a life no one wanted me to keep. It was winter, and I didn't even have a coat. My mother's voice was the last thing I heard before the door shut. "You made your choice," she said, cold and final. "Now live with it." I was 19, scared and suddenly alone. The street was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the world had gone silent just to watch me fall apart. I stood there for a long time, longer than I should have, hoping, I don't know what I was hoping for, that the door would open again, that my father would come out and tell me this was all a mistake, that my mother would soften. But nothing happened, and slowly, painfully, it began to sink in. I wasn't going back inside. I didn't even cry right away. I think shock has a way of freezing everything inside you. My body felt numb, but my thoughts, they were racing. Where would I go? Who could I call? How was I supposed to take care of a child when I couldn't even take care of myself? The father of my baby had already disappeared the moment I told him. He didn't yell, didn't argue. He just stepped back, like I had suddenly become a problem he didn't want to solve. And then he was gone. So there I was. No home, no support, no plan. Just me, and a life growing inside me I refused to give up. I started walking because standing still made it worse. Every step felt heavy, like I was dragging not just my body, but my entire future behind me. The cold bit into my skin, but I barely noticed. My mind was too loud. I kept thinking about how quickly everything had changed. Just a few days earlier, I had been sitting at the dinner table with my parents, listening to my mother talk about neighbors and groceries, like everything was normal. I had been rehearsing how to tell them. I thought maybe they would be angry at first, but then they'd calm down, that they'd see me, their daughter, scared and needing help. I was wrong, so painfully wrong. When I told them, my father didn't say a word at first. He just stared at me like he didn't recognize who I was anymore. My mother, she reacted instantly, her face twisted in disappointment, in something sharper than anger. "Who is he?" she demanded. When I hesitated, that was enough to make it worse. "You don't even have the decency to tell us who ruined your life?" she snapped. Ruined. That word stayed with me, because in that moment I realized they didn't see this as a mistake. They saw it as the end of everything. My future, their reputation, our family. I tried to explain. I tried to tell them I was scared, that I needed them, but every word I said only seemed to push them further away. "You're not keeping it," my father finally said. His voice was quiet, but it carried more weight than anything else in that room. "I am," I said. I don't know where that strength came from. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the tiny flicker of life inside me already making itself known. But I said it, and once I did, there was no going back. My mother stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Then you can't stay here." Just like that. No discussion, no compromise, just a line drawn in the sand. I remember looking at them both, waiting for someone to say they didn't mean it, waiting for the moment when love would win over anger. But it didn't. And that's how I ended up outside, in the cold, with nowhere to go. I eventually made my way to a bus stop. I sat there, hugging myself, trying to figure out what to do next. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I scrolled through my contacts, but every name felt like a risk. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to hear disappointment again. But I had no choice. I called the only person I thought might answer without judgment, my old school friend, Sarah. When she picked up, her voice was sleepy. "Hello?" I couldn't speak at first. My throat felt tight, like the words were stuck somewhere deep inside me. "Hello?" she repeated, a little more alert this time. "It's me," I finally managed. There was a pause. "Are you okay?" And that's when it broke. All the fear, all the hurt, everything I had been holding back, it came pouring out in sobs I couldn't control. "I need help," I whispered. Sarah didn't ask questions right away. She just said, "Where are you?" That simple question felt like a lifeline. I told her, and she came. I don't think I'll ever forget the sight of her car pulling up in front of that bus stop. It felt like the first moment of warmth in an all-weather freezing night. When I got in, she didn't look at me with judgment or disappointment. She just reached over and held my hand. "You're not alone," she said. Those words meant more than anything. That night, I stayed at her place. It wasn't big and it wasn't fancy, but it was safe. And for the first time since everything had happened, I allowed myself to breathe. But even in that small moment of relief, I knew something deep down. This was just the beginning. Because the truth was, being thrown out wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was everything that came after. Learning how to survive, learning how to raise a child when you're still trying to grow up yourself, learning how to carry the weight of rejection and not let it define you. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on my stomach, I made a quiet promise. No matter what happened, no matter how hard it got, I would give this child a life, even if it meant building that life from nothing. The next morning didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt like reality settling in. I woke up on Sarah's couch with a stiff neck and a heavy chest. For a few seconds, I forgot everything. That brief, fragile moment where your mind hasn't caught up yet. But then I saw the unfamiliar ceiling, the soft hum of her old fan, and it all came rushing back. I wasn't home anymore. I wasn't a daughter under my parents' roof. I was a pregnant girl with nowhere to go. I sat up slowly, careful, like even the smallest movement might break whatever strength I had left. My hand instinctively went to my stomach again. It was becoming a habit, something I did without thinking, a quiet reminder that I wasn't completely alone, even if it felt like it. From the kitchen, I could hear Sarah moving around, the sound of cups clinking, the kettle boiling. Normal sounds, comforting sounds. When I walked in, she turned and gave me a soft smile, not overly cheerful, not forced, just steady. "I made tea," she said. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet, and sat down at the small table. The warmth of the cup between my hands felt grounding, like something real I could hold on to. For a while, we sat in silence, and strangely, it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that lets you breathe. Finally, she looked at me carefully. "Do you want to tell me everything?" I hesitated, staring into my tea. The surface trembled slightly with my hands. I didn't know where to begin. There was so much to say, and at the same time, it all felt too heavy to put into words. But I started anyway. I told her about the argument, about my parents' reaction, about the way my father's silence hurt more than my mother's anger. And when I got to the part where they told me to leave, my voice cracked again. Sarah didn't interrupt. She didn't offer advice or judgment. She just listened. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. When I finished, there was a long pause. "That's a lot," she said quietly. I nodded. I don't know what to do. The words felt small compared to the weight of what I was feeling, but they were the truth. She leaned back slightly, thinking. "You can stay here for now, as long as you need." I looked up at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" She gave a small shrug. "It's not perfect, but it's something." Something. At that moment, something was everything. "Thank you," I whispered, and I meant it more than I had ever meant anything. The next few days passed in a strange blur. I was physically there in Sarah's apartment, but mentally I was somewhere else, somewhere between fear and determination, between grief and hope. We talked about practical things, things I had never really thought about before: money, work, doctor appointments, reality. "I have some savings," Sarah said one evening as we sat on the floor with a notepad between us. "Not much, but enough to help you get started." I shook my head quickly. "I can't take your money." "You're not taking it," she said firmly. "You're borrowing it, and you'll pay me back when you can." Her tone left no room for argument, so I nodded, because the truth was, I needed help, more than I wanted to admit. Finding a job wasn't easy, not in my situation. I had no degree, no real experience, and now I was pregnant. Even though I wasn't showing yet, the knowledge sat heavily on my shoulders during every interview. I remember one place in particular, a small cafe on a busy street. The owner seemed kind at first, asking about my availability, my experience. I thought, maybe this could work. But then he asked why I had left my previous situation, and I froze. I didn't know what to say. The truth felt too complicated, too messy. "I just needed a change," I said. He nodded slowly, but something in his expression shifted, like he could sense there was more I wasn't saying. "I'll let you know," he said. He never did. Rejection became a pattern. Each "we'll call you" felt like a quiet no. Each closed door made the world feel a little smaller. There were nights I lay awake on the couch, staring into the darkness, wondering if I had made a mistake, wondering if my parents had been right. But every time that thought crept in, I placed my hand on my stomach again, and something inside me refused to give up. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the life I had chosen to protect. One afternoon, after another unsuccessful job search, I came back to the apartment feeling completely drained. "I don't think I can do this," I said quietly. Sarah looked up from her book. "Do what?" "Any of it," I admitted. "It's too much." She studied me for a moment, then set her book aside and came to sit next to me. "Yes, it is," she said simply. I frowned slightly. "That's not very encouraging." She smiled faintly. "I'm not going to lie to you. This is hard. It's going to be hard for a long time." My chest tightened. "But that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you have to take it one step at a time." One step at a time. It sounded so simple, but when your whole world feels like it's collapsing, even one step can feel impossible. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know," she said gently. "And what if I fail?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for my hand again, just like she had at the bus stop. Then you'll figure out what to do next, she said. That's what strong people do. Strong? I didn't feel strong. I felt broken, lost, unprepared. But maybe strength wasn't about how you felt. Maybe it was about what you did despite it. A week later, something finally shifted. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough. I got a job cleaning rooms at a small motel on the edge of town. The pay was low, the hours were long, and the work was exhausting. But they didn't ask too many questions, and they hired me. I still remember the moment the manager handed me the uniform. It wasn't much, just a plain set of clothes with the motel's name stitched on the front. But to me, it felt like a lifeline. That first day, as I scrubbed floors and changed sheets, my back aching and my hands sore, I kept thinking about how far I had fallen. From a comfortable home to this, from being someone's daughter to being someone no one wanted. But then, somewhere in the middle of that long, tiring shift, a different thought crept in. I was still standing. I was still trying. And maybe, just maybe, that meant I hadn't fallen as far as I thought. That night, when I got back to Sarah's apartment, I sat quietly for a long time. Tired, aching, but also something else. A little stronger than I had been before. Because for the first time since everything had happened, I wasn't just surviving. I was starting to build something, piece by piece. Even if it was small, even if it was slow, it was mine. And as I lay down to sleep, my hand resting over my stomach again, I whispered something I hadn't said before. We're going to be okay. I didn't know if it was true yet, but for the first time, I believed it could be. The weeks turned into months faster than I expected, but somehow also slower than anything I had ever lived through. Every day followed a pattern that left me exhausted, but it also gave me something I desperately needed: structure. I would wake up early on Sarah's couch, careful not to make too much noise, and get ready for work. My body was already starting to feel different. Subtle changes at first, a little more tired than usual, a little more aware of myself. And then, slowly, undeniably, I began to show. At first, I tried to hide it. Loose clothes, oversized sweaters, anything that could buy me more time before questions started coming. Not because I was ashamed, but because I couldn't afford to lose the only job I had. The motel was far from glamorous. The hallways always smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals, and the carpets had seen better days. But it was steady work, and for me, that meant everything. I kept my head down, focused on my tasks, scrubbing, wiping, changing linens, room after room, day after day. Some of the other workers noticed me, of course. It's hard to not notice someone who barely speaks and works like they're carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. But most of them kept their distance, except for one woman. Her name was Lila. She had been working there longer than anyone else, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made people respect her without her having to say much. She wasn't unkind, but she wasn't overly warm either, at least not at first. One afternoon, as we were both restocking cleaning supplies in the small storage room, she glanced at me and said, "You're pushing yourself too hard." I froze slightly, caught off guard. "I'm fine," I replied quickly. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced. "You don't have to pretend with me." Her words lingered in the air. I didn't know why, but something about her tone made it hard to keep my guard up. Maybe it was the way she said it, not accusing, not judgmental, just observant. "I need the job," I said quietly. "I didn't say you didn't, but there's a difference between working hard and breaking yourself." I didn't respond, because deep down, I knew she was right. A few days later, it became impossible to hide the truth any longer. I was in the middle of cleaning one of the rooms when I suddenly felt dizzy. The world tilted slightly, and I had to grab onto the edge of the bed to steady myself. My heart started racing, and for a moment, panic set in. Not now, I thought. Please, not now. But my body didn't care about timing. Before I knew it, I was sitting on the floor trying to catch my breath. That's how Lila found me. She didn't panic. She didn't shout. She just crouched down beside me and said, "Look at me." I did. "Breathe," she instructed calmly. I followed her lead, inhaling slowly, then exhaling. After a few moments, the dizziness began to fade. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice softer now. I hesitated, but something inside me, something tired of carrying everything alone, finally gave in. "I'm pregnant," I said. The words felt heavy, even though they were already my reality. Lila didn't react the way I expected. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look disappointed. She just nodded, like it made sense. "How far along?" she asked. "Almost 4 months," I replied. She leaned back slightly, studying me. "And you've been working like this the whole time?" I gave a small, helpless shrug. "I didn't have a choice." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up and extended her hand. "Come on." "Where?" I asked, confused. "To talk to the manager." Panic shot through me instantly. "No," I said quickly, shaking my head. "I can't. What if he fires me?" "He might," she said honestly, "or he might not. But if you keep going like this, you're going to collapse again, and next time it could be worse." Her words hit harder than I expected. I looked down at my hands, then at my stomach. Fear twisted inside me, but so did something else. Responsibility. Slowly, I took her hand. The walk to the manager's office felt longer than it actually was, each step filled with doubt, with worst-case scenarios playing out in my mind. What if this was it? What if I lost everything again? Lila knocked once, then opened the door. The manager looked up, slightly annoyed at the interruption. "Yes?" "She needs to talk to you." Lila nodded toward me. I swallowed hard and stepped forward. "I wanted to let you know that I'm pregnant, and I understand if that's a problem, but I'm willing to keep working. I just might need—" I stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. For a moment, the silence felt unbearable. Then he sighed. "As long as you can do the work, it's not a problem. But if it starts affecting your performance, we'll have to reconsider." Relief washed over me so quickly it almost made me lightheaded again. "Thank you," I said, my voice full of gratitude. As we left the office, I glanced at Lila. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said simply. "But you did." She shrugged. Everyone needs someone in their corner. Her words stayed with me long after that moment, because she was right. And for the first time since everything had happened, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in this fight. As the months passed, my life became a careful balancing act. Work, rest, doctor visits, saving every bit of money I could, preparing for something I had never done before, motherhood. There were moments of fear, of course, moments when I lay awake at night wondering if I was enough, wondering if I could give my child the life they deserved. But there were also moments of quiet strength, like the first time I felt a small flutter. I was lying on the couch, half asleep, when it happened. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, a tiny, unmistakable movement. I froze. Then, slowly, a smile spread across my face. "Was that you?" I whispered. In that moment, everything felt real in a way it hadn't before. Not just the struggle, not just the fear, but the life. A life that depended on me, a life that was already reaching back. Tears filled my eyes, but this time, they weren't from sadness. They were from something deeper, something stronger, love. And as I lay there, my hand gently resting over that small, growing life, I realized something that changed everything. I hadn't been abandoned. I had been redirected, forced onto a path I never would have chosen, but one that was shaping me into someone I didn't even recognize yet. Someone stronger, someone braver, someone who refused to give up, no matter what. By the time I reached my 7th month, everything in my life revolved around one simple truth. I was running out of time to prepare. My body felt heavier, slower, like every movement required more effort than it used to. Even walking up the stairs to Sarah's apartment left me breathless some days. But I kept going. I had to, because stopping wasn't an option. Work became harder, no matter how much I tried to push through it. Bending, lifting, standing for hours, it all took a toll. There were moments I had to pause, pressing my hand against my lower back, breathing through the discomfort. I tried not to let anyone notice, but Lila always did. "You need to sit," she would say, already pulling a chair toward me. "I'm fine," I'd reply out of habit. But she never listened to that answer. "Sit," she'd repeat, firmer this time. And eventually, I would. I don't know when she stopped feeling like just a coworker and started feeling like something more. Not quite family, but something close to it. Something steady. Something reliable. One afternoon, during our break, she sat across from me and said, "Have you thought about where you're going to live after the baby comes?" The question hit harder than I expected. I had thought about it, of course. How could I not? But thinking about it and having a solution were two very different things. I don't know yet, I admitted. Sarah's apartment was small, too small for a newborn, especially long-term, and I couldn't expect her to carry me forever. She had her own life, her own responsibilities. "You can't bring a baby into uncertainty," Lila said gently, not as criticism, but as truth. I looked down at my hands. "I'm trying," I said. "I know, but trying isn't enough anymore. You need a plan." Her words weren't harsh, but they were real, and I needed real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch, staring into the darkness, my thoughts spinning in circles. Where would I go? How would I afford rent? Could I even manage work and a newborn at the same time? Every question felt like a wall, and I was running out of space to climb over them. The next morning, I made a decision. Not a perfect one, but a necessary one. I started looking for a place. It wasn't easy. Most landlords didn't even consider me once they saw me. A young, visibly pregnant woman with a low-income job didn't exactly inspire confidence. "I'm sorry, it's already taken." Or, "We're looking for someone more stable." Stable. That word stung, because I was trying so hard to be exactly that. After days of searching, rejection after rejection, I finally found something. A small, worn-down studio apartment on the edge of town. The paint was chipped, the windows let in a draft, and the kitchen was barely big enough to stand in. But it was affordable, and more importantly, it was mine. When I got the keys, I stood in the middle of that empty room for a long time. The silence felt different from the silence I had experienced before. This wasn't loneliness. This was possibility. I placed my hand on my stomach again, smiling softly. "This is it," I whispered. "Our place." It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Moving in was simple. I didn't have much to bring. A small suitcase of clothes, a few essentials, and a secondhand crib that Sarah helped me find. We spent an entire afternoon cleaning the apartment, wiping down surfaces, opening windows to let in fresh air. At one point, Sarah stood back, hands on her hips, and said, "It's not perfect, but it's a home." I looked around and nodded. It is. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. The closer I got to my due date, the more everything started to feel real in a way I couldn't ignore. The kicks became stronger, more frequent. Sometimes they would catch me off guard, just making me stop whatever I was doing just to feel them. Each movement was a reminder, a countdown. One evening, as I sat on the small bed in my apartment, folding tiny clothes I had bought with carefully saved money, a wave of emotion hit me unexpectedly. I held up one of the tiny shirts, staring at it. Something so small, so fragile. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "What if I'm not enough?" I whispered. The question slipped out before I could hold it back. It had been sitting inside me for months, growing quietly alongside everything else. What if I failed? What if I couldn't give this child what they needed? What if my parents had been right? The thought made my chest tighten. But then, as if in response, I felt a strong kick. I froze, then let out a soft, shaky laugh through my tears. "Okay," I whispered, placing my hand over the movement. "I hear you." And somehow, that simple moment grounded me. Because this wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, about trying, about loving. And I knew deep down I could do that. The day everything changed came earlier than I expected. I was at work, halfway through my shift, when I felt a sharp pain, not like the usual discomfort I'd grown used to. This was different, stronger, more urgent. I paused, gripping the edge of the sink, my heart starting to race. "No, it's too early," I thought. But then it came again, and this time there was no denying it. "Lila!" I called out, my voice strained. She appeared almost instantly, her expression shifting the moment she saw me. "It's time?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. Everything after that happened in a blur. She helped me out to her car, her movements calm but quick. "Breathe," she kept saying. "Just focus on breathing." The ride to the hospital felt endless and too fast at the same time. Every bump in the road sent waves of pain through my body, each one stronger than the last. Fear gripped me tightly. Not just fear of the pain, but fear of everything that was about to change. By the time we arrived, I was barely holding it together. The hospital lights were too bright, the voices around me too loud. Everything felt overwhelming. But through all that, one thought stayed clear. I wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Because no matter what happened next, I was about to meet the one person who had been with me through everything, the one person who had given me the strength to keep going. And as they wheeled me into the delivery room, my heart pounding, my body trembling, I whispered the only thing that mattered. "I'm ready." Even if I wasn't, even if I was terrified, I was ready to become a mother. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. People often talk about childbirth like it's just pain, like it's something you endure and then it's over. But it was more than that. It was overwhelming, consuming, like every part of me was being pushed to its absolute limit. Time didn't feel real in that room. Minutes stretched into hours and hours blurred into something I couldn't measure. The lights above me were too bright, the voices around me too distant and too loud all at once. Nurses moved in and out, their words blending together, instructions I tried to follow but barely understood. "Breathe. Push. You're doing great." I didn't feel great. I felt like I was breaking apart. There were moments I wanted to give up, moments I thought I couldn't do it anymore. My body was exhausted, my mind overwhelmed. Fear crept in again, stronger than ever. What if something went wrong? What if I couldn't do this? But then, through all of that, I remembered every step that had led me here. Every night I cried myself to sleep on Sarah's couch. Every rejection. Every moment I thought I wouldn't make it. And somehow, I found something deeper, something stronger than fear. "I can do this," I whispered, even though my voice barely came out. And I kept going until finally, everything changed. The room shifted, the tension broke, and then I heard it. A cry, small, sharp, but unmistakable. For a second, everything went still. My heart stopped, my breath caught, and then the nurse said the words that changed my life forever. "It's a boy! A boy!" Tears streamed down my face before I even realized I was crying, not from pain this time, but from something else entirely. Relief, love, disbelief. They placed him in my arms, and suddenly the world became quiet. It was just me and him. He was so small, so fragile. His tiny fingers curled instinctively, his face scrunched as he cried softly. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to memorize every detail. "You're here," I whispered. My voice trembled, but my heart felt full in a way I had never experienced before. All the fear, all the doubt, it faded into the background, because in that moment, nothing else mattered. Just him. Just us. I named him Ayan. It felt right the moment I said it. Strong, gentle, full of meaning, just like I hoped his life would be. The first few days after bringing him home were overwhelming. There's no other word for it. I had imagined it so many times during my pregnancy, how I would hold him, how I would care for him, but imagining something and living it are two completely different things. He cried at all hours of the night, sometimes for reasons I understood, hunger, discomfort, but other times I had no idea why. And that uncertainty, it was terrifying. I remember one night in particular. It was past midnight and Ayan wouldn't stop crying. I had fed him, changed him, rocked him. Nothing worked. My arms ached from holding him. My eyes burned from exhaustion. "I don't know what you need," I whispered, my voice breaking. Tears filled my eyes as I held him close, gently rocking back and forth. For a moment, I felt completely helpless, like I was failing already. But then, slowly, his cry softened. His tiny body relaxed against mine. And just like that, he fell asleep. I sat there for a long time, not moving, afraid that even the slightest shift would wake him. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know everything, but I was trying, and maybe that was enough. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Life became a cycle of feeding, changing, working, and trying to find moments of rest in between. It wasn't easy. There were days I felt like I was barely holding everything together. But there were also moments, small, beautiful moments that made everything worth it. Like the first time Ayan smiled. It was early in the morning, the sunlight just beginning to filter through the thin curtains of my apartment. I was holding him, talking softly, when suddenly his face lit up. A real smile, not just a reflex. I froze. "Was that?" I whispered. Then he did it again, and my heart felt like it might burst. I laughed, tears filling my eyes. "You smiled!" It was such a small thing, but to me, it was everything. Because it reminded me why I kept going, why I pushed through the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertainty. For him. Always for him. As Ayan grew, so did my determination. I worked harder than ever, picking up extra shifts whenever I could. Lila helped when she could, watching him for short periods so I could manage my schedule. Sarah still checked in, still supported me in ways I could never fully repay. Slowly, piece by piece, I built a life. Not a perfect one, but a real one. A life filled with struggle, yes, but also with love. And through it all, one thing became clear. I wasn't the same girl who had been thrown out of her home. That girl was scared, uncertain, dependent. But the woman I was becoming, she was different, stronger, wiser, more resilient than I ever thought possible. And every time I looked at Ayan, I saw the reason why. The reason I didn't give up. The reason I kept moving forward no matter how hard it got. Because he wasn't just my responsibility. He was my purpose. My proof that even from nothing, something beautiful could grow.
The years didn't pass all at once. They moved slowly, one day at a time, and small, quiet moments that didn't feel significant until I looked back and realized how far we had come. Ayan grew faster than I was ready for. One day he was a tiny baby in my arms, completely dependent on me for everything. And then suddenly he was crawling across the floor of our small apartment, curious about every little thing. Not long after that, he was taking his first steps, wobbling toward me with determination in his eyes. "Mama," he said one day, his voice soft and unsure. I froze. My heart stopped for just a second. Then I smiled so wide it hurt. "Yes," I whispered, kneeling down to him. "I'm right here." That word, Mama, it healed something deep inside me, something I didn't even realize was still broken. Life was still hard, of course. That didn't change overnight. I still worked long hours at the motel. I still counted every expense, making sure we had enough for rent, food, and the little things Ayan needed as he grew. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building. Every small step forward mattered. When Ayan turned 3, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I enrolled him in a small daycare. It wasn't fancy, and it took a big portion of my income, but I knew it was necessary. I needed to work more consistent hours, and more than that, he needed to be around other children, to learn, to grow. The first day I dropped him off, he clung to my leg, his tiny fingers gripping tightly. "Mama, don't go," he said, his voice trembling. My heart shattered. I knelt down, gently holding his face. "I'll come back," I promised. "I always come back." He didn't fully understand, but I did, because once someone hadn't come back for me, and I swore I would never let him feel that kind of abandonment. Walking away from that daycare was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Every step felt wrong, like I was leaving a part of myself behind. But when I picked him up later that day and he ran into my arms with a smile on his face, I knew I had made the right choice. Slowly, life found a rhythm. Work, home, Ayan. Repeat. Years passed like that, and with each passing year, I pushed myself a little further. I started taking small courses at night. Nothing big at first, just basic skills, things that could help me move beyond the motel job. It wasn't easy balancing everything. There were nights I studied while Ayan slept beside me, my eyes heavy, my body exhausted. But I kept going because I wanted more for us. I needed more for us. Lila noticed the change in me. "You're not going to stay here forever, are you?" she said one evening as we worked side by side. I shook my head. "No." She smiled slightly.
Good. Those small words meant more than she probably realized, because for so long I had felt stuck. But now I was moving, even if it was slow. When Ayan turned 6, I finally got my chance. A position opened at a small office building nearby. It wasn't a high-level job, just administrative work, but it was stable. Better pay, better hours. A step up. I remember sitting in that interview, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to stay calm. "Tell me about yourself," the interviewer said. For a moment, I hesitated, because how do you sum up a life like mine? "I'm someone who doesn't give up," I said finally. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't perfect, but it was true, and somehow it was enough. When I got the job, I cried. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because for the first time, I could see a future that wasn't just about getting through the next day. It was about building something lasting, something stable. Ayan started school not long after that. I still remember his first day. He stood there in his small uniform, his backpack almost bigger than he was, looking both excited and nervous. "Are you scared?" I asked gently. He shook his head quickly. "No." I smiled, recognizing the lie. "It's okay to be scared," I said. He looked up at me, thinking. "Will you come back?" he asked. The question hit me right in the chest. "Always," I said firmly, and I meant it. Every single day I showed up, no matter how tired I was, no matter how hard things got, because I knew what it felt like when someone didn't. Ayan grew into a kind, thoughtful boy, the kind of child who noticed when someone was sad, the kind who shared what little he had. Sometimes I would watch him quietly, overwhelmed by a mix of pride and disbelief. How had I raised someone like him? How had something so good come from something so painful? One evening when he was around 10, he asked me a question I had been dreading for years. "Do I have grandparents?" I froze. The room felt suddenly smaller. "Yes," I said carefully. "Where are they?" he asked. I hesitated. There it was, the truth I had avoided. "They live somewhere else," I said softly. "Why don't we see them?" he asked. His eyes were innocent, curious, unaware of the weight behind the question. I took a deep breath. "Sometimes families don't always stay close," I said softly. It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough for now. He nodded slowly, accepting it in the simple way children do. But I knew one day he would ask again, and next time I wouldn't be able to avoid it. That night, after he went to sleep, I sat alone thinking about everything I had left behind. My parents, my past, the door that had closed so suddenly. For years, I had pushed it all away, focusing only on moving forward. But now, I realized something. The past doesn't disappear. It waits. And sometimes it comes back when you least expect it. I didn't know then just how true that would become, or how one day the people who had turned their backs on me would stand face to face with the life I had built without them, and they wouldn't recognize it. Not at first. Life has a strange way of circling back to the places you once tried to forget. By the time Ayan turned 18, he had become everything I had ever hoped for, and more. Tall, confident, with a quiet strength in the way he carried himself. He had my eyes, but his own sense of calm, something steady that I used to wish I had when I was his age. Sometimes I would catch myself just watching him, still amazed at how far we had come. From that cold night on the porch to this. We weren't rich, we didn't have a perfect life, but we had something stronger. We had stability. We had respect. We had each other. Ion worked hard in school, always focused, always determined. He never complained about what we didn't have. Instead, he appreciated what we did. And that meant everything to me. One evening, as we sat at the small dining table in our apartment, he looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "I got accepted," he said. I blinked. "Accepted where?" He smiled slightly. "A business program, one of the top ones." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My chest tightened, my eyes filled with tears, and all I could do was stare at him. "You did?" I finally managed. He nodded. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor and pulled him into a hug. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered, my voice shaking. And I meant it with every part of me, because this wasn't just his achievement, it was ours. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt we had pushed through together, it had led to this. But then he said something that shifted everything. "They're hosting a formal event," he continued, "for new students and their families." I pulled back slightly, wiping my tears. "That's wonderful." He hesitated. "You should come," he said. My heart skipped. Of course I would go. There was no question about that. But I didn't know just how much that one decision would change everything. The night of the event arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple dress I had bought for the occasion. It wasn't expensive, but it was elegant enough. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the fabric. "You look beautiful," Ion said from the doorway. I turned to him, smiling. He looked grown, not like the little boy I used to carry in my arms, but a man, and for a moment, emotion caught in my throat again. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Ready." The venue was far more grand than anything I was used to. Large chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the room. People were dressed in fine clothes, their conversations blending into a soft hum of voices. I felt out of place almost immediately, but Ion stayed close to me. "You belong here," he said quietly, as if he could read my thoughts. I looked at him, surprised. "How do you always know what I'm thinking?" I asked. He smiled. "Because you raised me." His words settled something inside me, and slowly I relaxed. We moved through the room together, meeting people, exchanging polite smiles. I listened as Ion spoke with confidence, answering questions, sharing his goals. I watched him and felt nothing but pride, until everything stopped. At first, it was just a feeling, that strange, unmistakable sense that someone was watching you. I turned my head slightly, and my breath caught. Across the room, standing near one of the tables, were my parents. For a moment, the world around me faded. The noise, the people, everything. It was just them. Older, of course. Time had softened some of their features, added lines where there hadn't been any before, but I would have recognized them anywhere. My mother, my father, the same people who closed the door on me 20 years ago. My heart started racing. They hadn't seen me yet, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All the memories I had buried came rushing back at once. The cold night, the words, the silence, the pain. "Mama?" Ion's voice pulled me back. I blinked, trying to steady myself. "What's wrong?" he asked. I hesitated. This was it, the moment I had avoided for years, the truth I had kept just out of reach. I looked at him, then back at them, and I knew. I couldn't hide it anymore. Ayan, I said slowly, those are your grandparents. He froze. What? He whispered. I nodded slightly. He turned to look at them, his expression shifting from confusion to curiosity. Why didn't you ever tell me? He asked. My chest tightened. I wasn't ready, I admitted, and I didn't know if they would ever be ready either. Before he could respond, it happened. My mother turned. Her eyes scanned the room casually at first, then stopped on me. I saw the exact moment she recognized me. Her expression changed instantly. Shock, disbelief, something deeper. She said something to my father, who turned as well. And then they were both looking at me, at us. For a moment, no one moved. It felt like time had folded in on itself, bringing the past crashing into the present. And then, slowly, they started walking towards us. Each step felt heavier than the last. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Ayan stood beside me, silent, watching, waiting. When they finally stopped in front of us, the air felt thick, almost impossible to breathe. My mother spoke first. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Is it really you? I held her gaze. Yes, I said. My father looked at Ayan, then back at me. This is, he began. My son, I said firmly. There was a long pause, and then something I never expected. My mother's eyes filled with tears. They looked at Ayan again, really looked at him this time, and I saw it. The realization, the disbelief, the weight of everything they had done crashing down at once, because standing in front of them was the life they had rejected. Grown, strong, unmistakable. And they couldn't look away.
For a moment, none of us spoke. It was as if 20 years of silence had gathered in that space between us, heavy and unspoken, waiting to be acknowledged. I looked at my parents, really looked at them. They seemed smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in a way I couldn't quite explain. The authority they once held over my life, it wasn't there anymore. The fear I used to feel in their presence, gone. All that remained was history and the consequences of it. My mother was the first to break the silence again. He's your son? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded. Yes. Her eyes moved slowly over Ayan's face, taking in every detail, as if trying to piece together something she couldn't fully comprehend. She paused, searching for the right word. Grown. Ayan stood tall beside me, calm, composed. He didn't step forward, didn't shrink back. He simply observed. There was strength in that stillness. Yes, I said quietly, he is. My father cleared his throat, his gaze shifting between us. We didn't know. His voice trailed off. And for a second, something inside me almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered. The door, the cold, the silence. You didn't want to know, I said, my tone steady but firm. The words landed harder than I expected. My mother flinched slightly. That's not... She stopped herself, because deep down she knew it was true. Ayan glanced at me, then back at them. You're my grandparents? He asked,
his voice calm but curious. My parents both nodded slowly, almost cautiously. "Yes," my mother said, "we are." There was a long pause, and then Ayan asked the question that had been waiting all these years. "Then where were you?" The room felt quieter somehow, even though nothing around us had changed. My father looked away first. My mother? She didn't. She held his gaze, and I saw something shift in her expression, something raw, something real. "We made a mistake," she said softly. The simplicity of it surprised me. After all these years, after everything, that was what she had to say? A mistake? I let out a slow breath, shaking my head slightly. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "Yes," she admitted, "it was." There was no defense, no excuses, and somehow that made it harder, because anger is easier to hold on to when the other person fights back. But this was different. Ayan glanced between us, trying to understand the weight of what was being said. "You sent her away?" he asked. Neither of them answered right away, but their silence said everything. I felt his hand brush lightly against mine, a quiet gesture, support. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until now. I wasn't that scared 19-year-old girl anymore. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their acceptance, because I had already built a life without it, a life they were only just now seeing. "I raised him on my own," I said, my voice steady, "with help from people who chose to stay." My mother's tears fell freely now. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy, late, but real. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't just see the woman who had turned me away. I saw someone who had to live with that decision every single day since then. And yet, some things can't be undone. "I needed you," I said quietly. "Back then, I needed you." Her face crumpled, the weight of those words settling deep. "I know," she said, "and I failed you." My father finally spoke again, his voice lower than before. We thought we were doing what was right." I met his gaze. "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer. Because there was no answer that can make it right. Ayan shifted slightly beside me. "And now?" he asked. "What do you want now?" It was a simple question, but it carried everything. My parents exchanged a glance. Then my mother looked at him again. "We want a chance," she said. A chance. The word echoed in my mind. 20 years ago, I had begged for one, just one. And now, they were the ones asking. I looked at Ayan, because this wasn't just my decision anymore. It was his life, his story. He thought for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then he said something that surprised all of us. "You can't change the past, but you can choose what you do now." His voice was steady, mature beyond his years. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride, because that strength, that wisdom, it came from everything we had been through together. My mother nodded slowly, her tears still in her eyes. "We understand that," she said. There was a long pause, and then Ayan looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked. The question caught me off guard, because for so long, I had been the one making decisions for him, protecting him, guiding him. But now, he was asking me to share this moment with him, not control it, not decide it alone, just Share it. I took a deep breath and I answered honestly. I think forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. My parents listened closely. But it does mean choosing not to carry the pain forever. My voice softened slightly. For my own peace and for yours. The words felt right. Not easy, but right. Ayan nodded. Then he turned back to them. We can start slowly, but it has to be real. My mother let out a small, shaky breath. Thank you, she whispered. And for the first time in 20 years, something shifted. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to open a door that was once slammed shut. As the night continued, the tension slowly eased. Conversations were cautious, careful, but genuine. There was no pretending that everything was fine, but there was something else. Effort. And sometimes that's where healing begins. Later, as Ayan and I walked out of the venue together, the cool night air wrapping around us, I felt something I hadn't expected. Lightness. Not because everything was resolved, but because I had finally faced something I had carried for so long. You okay? Ayan asked. I smiled softly. Yeah, I said. He nodded, then smiled back. You did good, he said. I let out a small laugh. So did you. We walked in silence for a moment, and then I looked at him, really looked at him. This boy, this young man who had once been nothing more than a fragile hope inside me. And now, he was my greatest strength, my proof, my answer to everything I had lost. Because 20 years ago, they had seen my pregnancy as the end. But standing here now, I knew the truth. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a life I built from nothing, a life filled with struggle, yes, but also with love, resilience, and purpose. And in the end, that made all the difference.